an introduction, we looked at the Beatitudes and we asked ourselves, is this true of me? Am I poor in spirit? Am I hungry and thirsting after righteousness? Am I a peacemaker? Then next, Jesus said to his followers that they would shine and be salty. And we ask, are we being salt and light in this world, or are we letting the world eclipse our relationship with Jesus? We learned that not only we cannot murder, and that includes we never get to treat anybody like a nobody. And then over the 2 weeks, we looked at sex and lust and divorce, and oneness can only happen in covenant marriage. And today, it's exciting because we're going to look at something that's difficult, but it's when we speak the truth, when we tell the truth, we speak paradise into being. And I'm going to explain that in just a little while. When we speak falsely, when we don't tell the truth, when we lie, we bring the world closer to hell. The truth will set you free, and the truth brings heaven. I'm going to read from Genesis chapter 1, parts of it, and I want you to think about what God said. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. This was the first day. God saw the light was good, and he separated the light from darkness. Now, the second day, and God said, and he separated the waters above from below. The third day, God said, and he created the land and plants and trees, and God saw that it was good. And God said, let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years. And let them be as lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth. And it was so. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning on the fourth day. The fifth day, and God said, the birds of the air and the fish of the sea. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their own kind, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. And God made the wild animals according to their kind, the livestock to their kind, and all the creatures that move along the ground. And God saw that it was good. And listen to this. Then God said, verse 26, let us make mankind in our image and our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock and the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. Verse 27, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them, male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves along the ground. God saw that all he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. So right before we pray, God spoke the world into existence, and it was perfect. Our words are important. My mama always said, honesty is the best policy. And I was trying to figure out where that phrase came from, and a lot of people gave it to Benjamin Franklin, but it goes way back farther than that. We know into the 1500s, but we know it goes all the way back to the Bible. My daddy said, Tony, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember what you said. He had a lot of sayings like that. Parents teach their children to tell the truth. And we know telling the truth is right. As a matter of fact, the only way we could build a culture is by telling the truth. And I was thinking about this the other day. Think about Amazon. No, think about eBay. When it seems like something like that wouldn't be able to work because you're looking at a picture of something and giving somebody money, hoping they mail this thing to you. But it works. As a matter of fact, it works really well because they have something that if I want to sell something and you would like to purchase it and I take pictures of it and then you send me money and I send you the item, if I don't send you the item, you can go on my little thing and go, 1 star or no star or whatever. Or you could say this person's a great seller. So if you want to buy an item, you can look and they said, well, they've sold 1,000 other items and everybody seemed to be really happy with it. You can look at the comments. And when we do that, when we do a truthful buy, the world works. Our question today is, why should we tell the truth? The truth redeems the world from hell. And we're going to see what Jesus says. The truth, we know, will set you free. And in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus thought truth and truth-telling and what we say was so important that he puts it along the lines. I mean, we've been talking about murder, what that really means, and lust and adultery, and we've just been going down this. And the next thing you know, Jesus is talking about what we say. Listen, he said this. Jesus said, again, you have heard that it was said to people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it's God's throne, or by earth, for it's his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond that comes from the evil one. Remember that. Jesus said, you've heard it said, which means he's critiquing an interpretation of the law of God. We know what he says in the 9th commandment, and he says the religious leaders are teaching y'all, what the religious leaders are saying is, you have to keep your oaths to the Lord. But if you swear by something else, you're not really bound to your word. And so they had whole bunches of little rules. If you swear by heaven or earth or by Jerusalem or by your head, by your family name, and you decide to break that later, that's okay. But if you use God's name, then you have to keep that vow or that oath. And Jesus says, I say unto you, and Christians for centuries have thought, maybe he's meaning don't make a public promise or don't swear that. That's not what Jesus is saying. And the reason we know that's not true is because Jesus did it himself. During his trial in Matthew 26, the high priest says, I charge you under oath by the living God, are you the Christ? And Jesus had been silent up to that point. And Jesus said, yes, it is as you say. We see Galatians 1, 1 Corinthians, Paul takes an oath. We go back to Genesis chapter 15, and God actually makes a vow and an oath to Abraham. All that means is an oath or a promise just means an observed word. A vow, an observed word, like in a wedding. We've made a vow, we've made a covenant, we've made a promise, and people observed it. Or in court. The whole Bible is built on covenants and public promises and observed words and accountability. So he doesn't mean don't take an oath at all. As a matter of fact, it's something quite the opposite. Jesus is saying if you think you can separate and create levels of truthfulness, you're wrong. If you think I have to be truthful when I'm using this particular ascription, that's when I really have to be. But, beloved, Jesus is telling us, don't you realize, if you think I only have to be truthful if I use the name of God, when we use the heavens, that's God's throne. When you use the earth, that's his footstool. Don't you realize God's everywhere? He's observing every one of our words always. Every one of our thoughts. And so Jesus is saying every yes and every no must be as truthful as if you just swore it on a stack of Bibles on network television. Like, it's observed. God sees it. God hears it. Every word is observed because God is everywhere. And the truth, we know this, the truth will set us free. And this is hard teaching. And you're going to see, I mean, this was the hardest one all week, just grappling with my words always. And I want to do it right because Jesus is the great physician. And sometimes physicians hurt you to make you better. Dr. Chu, I thanked him this week. I actually got 100 pounds overhead and I cleaned it. Put it overhead and squat. I mean, it was awesome. And I thanked him. But it hurt a long time for what he did to have to fix it. Does that make sense? Like he had to get in there and hurt me to ultimately make it better. And I said at the gym the other day, I said, somebody was like, well, how's it been feeling? And I said, I almost started crying this week. I rolled over on my right side and realized that I haven't laid on my right side in over a decade because it always hurt. That shoulder always hurt. And I actually fell asleep facing a different direction. And I was like, never mind. It was awesome to me. If you never had a pain where you couldn't sleep a certain way, but I was able to sleep. And it was like, but it had to be something painful first. And so when we get into any of the teachings of Jesus, it's going to be like a scalpel. Like he's going to get in there and he's going to cut something and it's going to hurt. And as we walk through this, it's going to feel like, man, I'm just getting all cut up. And I've been going through it all week studying it, so you're going to get it in just a few minutes. You're going to get a week's worth of stuff all in an hour and a half. But I want to do it right because there's a lot of painful news in how we talk, but guilt, pain, shame maybe, and we'll be thinking, I can't take the pain, but listen, there's so much good news because Jesus is going to tell us what he can do for us in this. This teaching will cleanse us. It'll repair us. If we let the Logos, the Word, the truth, the healing will take place. And the first thing is Jesus is saying truthfulness is so important. Jesus says yes and every no. Everything we say is going to be measured as if we're making a vow. Because all of our speech is observed by God. God says, I want everything you say to be true. And why would he say that? I'll tell you what I think. When we realize where it comes to the Sermon on the Mount, and we've been talking, murder, violence, power, sex, lust, adultery, those seem like bigger deals. And one of the reasons is because a lack of untruthfulness is something that I guess goes down easier. Jerry Bridges called them respectable sins. There's things that if we find out somebody does, we're like, oh. But if somebody, if they didn't tell us something, they didn't communicate the truth, it's something that goes down easier. It seems like maybe violence, robbery, that's more startling. Maybe it's because of the environments we live in. If you've ever been in sales, right? People, there's so much around you. If you actually are a person that tells the truth, other people in the organization actually get mad at you. Some of you work in environments where out and out lies, maybe half-truths, seem like just the air that you're breathing at your job. In our culture, it feels like we swim in lies. I mean, if you just watch TV or social media, I think it's like more, it seems like more than ever, but I don't know if that's really true. But it seems like people will take information instead of looking and finding out if the information's really true, will then post that information to their 2,000 friends like it is true. Or you start hearing things on TV, and there was a couple that were just past week, and I was like, well, we already learned that was a lie, but why are they keeping saying it like it's a true statement? And if you're in a culture like that, we become like the proverbial frog. Degree by degree, the frog's in the kettle, sort of happy, not realizing what's happening to it, that it's getting cooked and it's going to die. And we start lying so young. You don't have to teach children to lie. Do you ever notice that? I remember my own children and realizing, wow, they learned how to lie so early. They weren't even talking yet, and they were lying. No, nobody knows what I mean? Like hiding stuff. Yeah, nobody ever observed that with their kids? Okay, two of you. All your other kids are angels. Scott Peck wrote a paper called People of the Lie, and he said children lie so naturally. He says people are constantly asking him, why is there so much evil in the world? He said, that's a ridiculous question. Physicists know that in the physical world, things go to more and more random disorder, chaos. That's just how it works. It's called things go to chaos, the second law of thermodynamics. Things break down. All systems go from order to disorder, from order to chaos. And he says the same thing's true in the moral world. He says the tendency to lie is absolutely natural to a child. They come from the womb speaking lies. If not checked, it can lead you into deeper and deeper evil. You have to learn. We have to learn. We have to teach our children. You have to tell the truth. He wrote, the children generally lie and steal and cheat and want to make reality what they want it to be is routinely observed in the studies. The fact that they grow up to become truly honest adult is what seems more remarkable. What seems remarkable is that you can have a functioning society where people can tell the truth. And the reason why Jesus says you have to understand the battle for truthfulness is fought in every little yes and no. So it just can't be big things to us. And this is why it's so hard. It has to be with our interaction. It's not like a huge temptation where it just happened once. We talk all the time. And if you talk a lot, you've got way more danger. It's not really like robbery. It's not really like violence. It goes down easy. But the reason truthfulness is so important, the reason Jesus is talking about why this promise keeping, but being true to your word, you live consistently with what you've said. Truthfulness is what we need to be a real human, because that's how we were created. We were created to be truthful. And it's so fragile, and we're going to see an example of this in a minute. It's so fragile that we actually speak truth and we start to move towards heaven. When we lie, we start to bring the world towards hell. Lewis Smead wrote an essay on making a vow, telling the truth, promising. And he said, the only way to overcome the unpredictability of your future is the promise, the power of promising and truthfulness. If forgiving is the only remedy for your painful past, promising is the only remedy for your uncertain future. First of all, he says the only way to be human and free in terms of your past is to forgive. Why? Well, why should we forgive? It's the best thing for us to forgive. If we forgive, it's the best thing for us. It's the best thing for other people. If we truly forgive, it's the best thing, the healthiest thing for us. And we know that if we've gone through that. And it's the best thing for everybody that lives with us. Like the people we're directly around when we forgive. It's the best thing to truly forgive. If we don't forgive, we're actually controlled by our past. We get programmed by our past then. And as long as we refuse to forgive and our past continues to have us by the throat, and we'll never grow, we'll never move. And if we don't forgive like the Bible says, and like Christ gives us the power to do, we're not free. We're still being controlled. And then he writes, in the same way, making and keeping promises, making commitments, being true to people, being true and reliable and dependable and following through on the things that you say, is the only way that we have freedom in an unpredictable future, because we don't know what the future holds. So we need to be truthful. And when he says you make a promise, you call the world to witness that you're not an animal pushed by your feelings or your moods or your glands. We're not controlled by our instincts. We're actually making a decision. And the fact that you can make a promise now shows I'm a free person. I'm a human being. I'm making a commitment. I can stick with it. That makes us who we are. To tell the truth. Listen, there's not an easy way out of just saying, well, it's a little lie. Taking the easy way out and saying, I'm going to tell a little lie or not telling the truth, or telling the truth. Those are not just different choices. They're two pathways. They're not just two choices. They're different pathways. They are two different ways of existing. We try, like children, to manipulate the world, and we use our words to manipulate the world into delivering what we want. Sometimes it's used to act politically, not necessarily in the political world, but politically. It's a spin. Listen to this. Listen to the professor. This is what he said about lying, and he called it spinning. It's the specialty of unscrupulous marketers, salesmen, advertisers, pickup artists, slogan-possessed utopias, and psychopaths. It's the speech people engage in when they attempt to influence and manipulate others. It's what the university student does when they write an essay to please the professor instead of articulating and clarifying their own ideas. It's what everyone does when they want something and decide to falsify it to please and flatter to get it. It's scheming, it's sloganeering, it's propaganda. To conduct life like this is to become possessed by ill-formed desires and then craft speech and action in a manner that appears likely, rationally, to bring that in. Typical calculated ends might include to impose my ideological beliefs, to prove that I was right, to appear competent, to ratchet myself up in the hierarchy, to avoid responsibility or its twin, to garner credit for others' actions, to be promoted, to attract the lion's share of attention, to ensure everyone likes me, to justify my cynicism, to minimize conflict, to always appear as the sainted one. Lying is just being selfish, and we have to stop. Stop trying to use our speech like children to try to get what we want. Instead, like Jesus says, let our yes be yes and our no be no. This is hard because I was listening to one professor talk about it, and he said, if you really, really, really think about what you say and make sure that what you say is true, it's going to be difficult. It's never going to be easy to think like this all the time. But you will be a different person in 2 years, 3 years, and 5 years. You won't even recognize yourself. We should, with love, try to articulate what we believe to be true as carefully as possible, and then accept the outcome of our truthfulness. Too many times, I think that the reason that we're not truthful in our speech is we think we already know the outcome of what's going to happen, and so we're trying to manipulate the world. So we might say we have a good motive in the reason why we're saying something or we're not saying something. But it's so hard. It's really an act of faith. And if you're sitting here going, no, I'm truthful all the time, you really need to sit down and be with your own head for a little while and think about your conversations. We are trusting Jesus when we tell the truth. If we obey and we tell the truth, we get to let go of the outcome. If I know that I'm speaking the truth in love, because we're going to talk about that in a minute, if I know that I'm speaking the truth in love, then I can freely in faith let God worry about what the outcome of that is going to be. If you say, listen to this, if you say no to your boss or to your spouse or to your mother when it needs to be said, you transform yourself into someone who can say no when it needs to be said. This is a great example. If you say yes when no needs to be said, you transform yourself into someone who can only say yes even when it is very clearly a time to say no. If you ever wonder how perfectly ordinary, decent people could find themselves doing terrible things, like in the Gulag guard camps, you have your answer. By the time no seriously needed to be said, there was no one capable of saying it. If you betray yourself, if you say untrue things, if you act out of a lie, you just weaken who you are. We move closer towards hell every time. And if you have a weak character, then adversity will mow you down when it appears. You will hide when there's no place left to hide, and you'll find yourselves doing terrible things. One guy writing about the totalitarian states, he said, lying linked us so to hell. Historians of the 20th century say it's not top-down leaders influencing the innocent masses in the totalitarian states. It's the moral failing of individual people not speaking the truth. He said it was the people, and everybody was afraid. Everybody was afraid. Listen, I get it. It is scary. It is afraid. And I think we go back to the garden. Well, why were they hiding in the garden? Why were Adam and Eve hiding? And it says because they were naked. We're naked. No, they were vulnerable. That's what they felt, vulnerable. God created the world. When He spoke, it was truth. And He created something perfect. And a lie brought us closer to hell. Do you see? It was such a huge deal to me thinking about this all week, because it wasn't what I thought when I started digging in. When I started digging in, I was like, yeah, we should tell the truth. You should make the correct kind of reports when you turn in your expense account. I was going to do that whole thing and thinking we're mostly kind of upstanding people. And as I kept doing, I just lie all the time, sometimes not saying something when it needs to be said. It's deceit that makes people more miserable beyond what they can bear. It's deceit that fills the human soul with resentment and vengeance. It's deceit that produces the terrible suffering of mankind, the death camps of the Nazis, the torture chambers of the genocide of Stalin, and the even greater monster Mao. It's the deceit that killed hundreds of millions of people in the 20th century. It was deceit that almost doomed our civilization itself. It was deceit that still threatens us today. Do we see the importance of truth? Every battle is at every yes and no. And we realize when we lose the truth, truth is not only necessary for making us human beings, it's necessary for how we treat other human beings. Because what are we doing to them when we lie? Imagine for a moment, thinking about this, a society in which every political leader was expected by the people to be lying. A society in which every business leader was expected by the people to not honor their contracts. Where every society in every academic field was actually fraudulent. Where every minister was actually a hypocrite. You couldn't have a society. There would be no commerce, no family, no academic life. There could be nothing. You don't have to imagine a society like that, because we've already seen it. It's already been studied. Eastern Europe, the communist countries, all the studies showed they collapsed from the inside from lies. There was so much lying. The fact that nobody trusted anyone else. You couldn't believe the political leaders. You couldn't believe journalists. You couldn't believe scholars. You couldn't even go to a psychiatrist, because this one scholar said, to really do scholarship, it had to fit in the party line. The journalist was supposed to spout the party line. The psychiatrists were there to get rid of political activists. So they would tell on it. 1 in 3 people was an informant to the government. There was no such thing as free speech. You had to be scared, because if you lived in a house of 6 people, probably 2 of them were informants. So you weren't even free to think about your own ideas or to even talk about them, because you would be one of the millions and millions that would either be killed or sent to the gulags. Life was brutalized there because nobody told the truth. You can't have a civilization. It was a community, one person said, like wolf packs. It was just gangs of people. Solzhenitsyn published the Gulag Archipelago. There was a 50th anniversary edition that just came out this week. And no one could ever say what Stalin did was not true communism, because it was all based on lies. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Nazi concentrate survivor, he wrote The Man's Search for Meaning. He drew a similar conclusion. Deceit, inauthentic individual existence is the precursor to social totalitarianism. If we don't speak up, if we don't speak the truth, we could kill our own society and crumble. I love this, the capacity of the rational mind, the capacity as people to deceive, manipulate, scheme, trick, falsify, minimize, mislead, betray, evade, deny, omit, rationalize, exaggerate, obscure is so endless. One scholar who studied centuries of thought concentrated on clarifying the nature of moral endeavor to tell the truth, regarded what people could do by lying, came to conclude that lying is positively demonic. Not a Christian guy. He was like, what can happen when we all start doing that? It transforms. After that, think about it. First, a little lie. And then several lies. Oh my goodness, I'm having flashbacks to being a teenager. Because now I've got to get my brothers in on this, right? Because I lied and said I wasn't there, but they know where I was. But if my parents asked, I am so sorry, Mom. Just think, and stuff Stuff that probably wouldn't have been that big of a deal if I'd have just told the truth. But since I lied, and now, and then it's just going to spiral out of control because I'm going to have to lie about it, and then I've got to get my friends on it because what if my dad talks to Mr. Thomas because Mr. Thomas was home and nobody knows what I'm talking about? You're all just looking at me like, oh, you're such a liar. We're so good. After that distorted thinking, to avoid the shame that the lie produced, then to form more lies to cover up the consequences of the lies, then most terribly, the transform of those necessary lies into the specialization structure, it actually becomes belief. My daddy said about this guy, he said, he lies so much, he now believes his lies. And we've probably met people like that. I hope none of you are like that. Like, you just lied so much, now you're convinced that the actual stories that you're telling actually happened. Truth is actually critical. This is what Jesus is saying. Truth is so critical to who we are as a people. You probably know 1,000 people in your lifetime. Maybe more, but say 1,000. So if you know 1,000 people, and all those 1,000 people know 1,000 people, you're one person away from 1,000,000 people. You're 2 people away from 1 billion. So think about our words. If our words are true then, come on, Russell, think with me like this. If we tell the truth, we're moving us towards paradise, towards heaven. The truth will set us free. If we lie, we're influencing a whole bunch of people, even if it only seems like one interaction. We're one person away from 1,000,000. And now you just blow that up with social media, the internet. Like, think about that. Think about when a newscaster knowingly says something he knows to be false, trying to influence a group of people. Think of a politician standing up and not telling the truth, where that goes. A teacher that is taking young students and teaching them something they know to be not true. Minister, it could go on and on. That's why the judgment of teachers is probably even more, because think about how important people are listening to your word when you... I'm telling you, this is hard week. Anybody want to write on their connection card? Yeah, send me all those notes and stuff you studied. You should do it, but how are we going to communicate? How are we going to know that when I say something, my yes is yes, my no is no, that every little yes and no is a battleground for heaven? Which way are you going to go? When Jesus gives us this yes and no, he's telling us the nature of truthfulness and integrity. We can put it this way. The word integrity actually comes from integer, which means whole, as opposed to fragmented. This is good because it means wholeness. It actually means simplicity. I just keep thinking of what my dad said. If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember what you said. It's simple. It's simple if you tell the truth because you're not thinking up anything. This is what happened. This is where I was. This is where I took your car. This is... When Jesus is meaning, when he says, let your yes actually be yes and your no be no, it's the essence of truthfulness. It's sincerity. And the essence of falsehood is not simply it just being false. It's actually deception. You can lie just as well not saying anything at the right time and just letting it be thought and then think, well, I didn't lie. Well, you didn't tell the truth. You can lie to sometimes by telling people something that's true, but don't finish it. The point is, are we people that have integrity? Are we whole? Is it simple? Or are we fragmented? When you say what you do, and when people are looking at you, are you the same kind of person when people aren't looking at you? The whole point behind what Jesus is saying, every yes and every no is observed already. God sees it. Every yes, every no is observed, which means you shouldn't be one way while people are looking and another way when they're not. That's how we kind of know if we're an honest person. And that's kind of hard when I'm writing. I'm sitting here going, when Jesus is saying every yes and every no is observed, It's almost like we need to be thinking as I'm talking that God is standing beside me, observing my words as I communicate to this person. Am I going to communicate with God standing beside me as one taking us towards glory, towards heaven, towards paradise? Or am I going to speak and just bring all of us, the 1 million, 2 billion? So are you a person that's truth-telling? If we're not, we're dehumanizing ourselves. And we're dehumanizing the people around us. We were created to be truthful. And it's so hard because remember in Galatians, when we were studying Galatians, and remember that there is this battle. And we just talked about this last week at the Bible study. There is this battle. And the battle is this, the flesh. We still have this flesh. But the Spirit is in us, and God gives us the power, and we know what the acts of the sinful nature or the flesh are. But we know what the acts of the Spirit are. So what are we going to move towards? And I would say it's probably more like, tell the truth, or just don't lie. But it's even more than that. If we make sure that we're thinking and saying our words, and our words are true, then we don't have to worry about lying because we're telling the truth. So it's not like, how do I break this bad habit? It's, how do I do the right thing? And if I'm busy doing the right thing, if I'm busy telling the truth, then I don't have to worry about lying. And it's so hard because I know that there's so many different things that we think. And if you are a person, the 5 big personality things, if you're high in agreeableness and you don't want conflict, then that's really kind of hard for you. Now, if you're high in disagreeableness, it might be easier for you to tell the truth, but probably not in a way that it gets received, so it's going to cancel itself out. But there's got to be a way that we have to do it. We were created to be truthful. And you know what? We're being truthful to ourselves now, but we're also being truthful to our future self. Does that make sense? Like, whatever I do now, I'm doing to later on Tony. So if I take care of myself now, I'm taking care of future Tony too. If Tony now is telling the truth, it's going to help out Tony later, especially interacting with other people. And I never saw this, but I was reading this. It said there's a Simpson episode where Homer downs a quart of mayonnaise and vodka. And Marge says, you really shouldn't do that. And Homer says, that's a problem for future Homer. I'm glad I'm not him. Well, think about that. What we do now creates our future. I know I'm kind of stretching our thinking, but look, how we conduct ourselves now will affect the relationships later on. So if I want to have relationships later on, the Tony now needs to be truthful, so Tony now has some friends. Because people don't have to hang around you. They can hang around somebody else. No, nobody's getting it? Okay. If you lie now, then people won't like you. And then future you will have no friends. And then you'll die. I don't know, And you know what? Sometimes it's scary to hang around a really truthful person, But you know what you got. Right? They're going to tell you. One person wrote, people of integrity can be pretty frightening. When Chuck Colson became a Christian during Watergate, I'm kind of aging myself, but if some of you are like this, yeah, okay, you're older than me. Some people thought he was going to get killed because he thought, well, Christians, we need to tell the truth. So he was telling the truth. I don't know. But people knew he was telling the truth. And so when he was dealing with them, they knew he was telling the truth. Because if he would tell the truth when his life was on the line, he's going to tell his truth in business dealings with me. So Chuck Colson then, future Chuck Colson, people trusted him. So think about that. One writer says, the problem with people who are absolutely honest like that, who will jeopardize their life and career just to tell the truth. We may admire such selfless moral courage, but that kind of purity of spirit is frightening. If we are known as people of integrity and honest, they'll know who we are, we'll be approachable, we'll be trusted. And if we can be trusted because we're going to tell the truth, when we speak the truth about Jesus, we're going to bring people closer. Now, back to the other kind of person. People who say, I'm committed to the truth, I tell the truth, I believe the truth, I'm a straight shooter, that's why I tell people like it is. If people don't like it, well, that's on them. Well, the Apostle Paul wrote, speak the truth in love. And Paul's saying if you don't speak the truth in love, you're not really honoring the truth. If you tell the truth anywhere, anytime, and you don't care about the fact that you're saying it in the wrong tone, or you're saying it at the wrong time, or in the wrong setting, or maybe you're not supposed to be the person who says it to them. You get where I'm going with this? If you don't speak the truth in love, you don't speak the truth. You just blurt it out in the worst possible time, and it could be actually hurtful. That doesn't show you honor the truth. Truth without love isn't honoring the truth. You don't really want the truth to get through. You're just an irritable person. So don't think when we're talking about truthfulness, it's, I said the truth. Well, if you didn't do it in a way that they could hear it, or that they could accept it, then it really wasn't truth at all. Love without truth really isn't love. They have to be together. So how do we become this? And I think we can see it. How do we become truthful? How do we become that kind of person with integrity? Let your yes be yes, your no be no. Jesus is saying it. We are a created people. God spoke the world into existence, and God said, that's the idea of Logos, right? Logos, the Word. Jesus is the Word. And so words are important, and words need to be true, and everything that God spoke was true, and God spoke us. And He said, let us make man in our image. So when we tell the truth, we honor God. We honor who created us. And we bring truth in. Truth builds churches that can stand for thousands of years. So the truth feeds and clothes the poor. It makes nations safe. Truth reduces the terrible complexity of man. Truth makes the past truly the past and makes the best use of future possibilities. The truth is the ultimate natural resource. It's the light in the darkness. We need to see the truth and tell the truth. As Christ is identified as the Logos is the Word. The Word is the thing that transformed chaos into order. God, He took it and He spoke and made it order. And in human form, when Jesus comes, He sacrifices Himself voluntarily to the truth. And He is dead and buried, and He's raised. The Word that produces order from chaos sacrifices everything. And Christians know it's not just because He created us, because He redeemed us. You are not your own, you were bought with a price. If you really want to understand how this works, if we really want to be motivated, think about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Everybody else is asleep. He is sweating drops of blood because He sees the cup of God's wrath. Jesus is seeing hell. He's seeing what? Punishment He's going to take that He did not deserve. And for a moment, He breaks and He goes, Father, I don't know if I could do this. But not my will, yours be done. If we can see Him doing that for us, if we can see Him, then we can look and go, you know what? When nobody's looking, I can still be the person of integrity. I can tell the truth. Why should we tell the truth? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The truth redeems the world from hell. The truth will set you free. Let's pray. Thank you, Father, for the joy of knowing what your Son did for us. And out of that joy, we can tell the truth. We can pay the price of truth-telling. Make us people of integrity. Make us people of truth-telling. Let us be so well known as people of our word that nobody needs to make a promise and things because they just trust what we say. If we're known for that here, it's really going to be a different world. We will move people towards a relationship with you in heaven. We want to reflect the image of your Son, Jesus Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen.